Greetings from the Emerald Isle, whisky lovers. My name's Al, and this is Whisky Straight. So we're back at the GlenDronach distillery, which is in the Highlands of Scotland. Well, where else is it going to be? So, if you want to be really precise about it, it's in the East Highland Hills, and at GlenDronach, they're famed for their sherry cask finishes. You could actually say they're the original sherry fairies. You know, well, they're not fairies, but it rhymes, you know what I mean? You get my point. But anyway, all you have to do is take a look at their logo, and when you see the legend underneath, it says the sherry cask connoisseurs, and that pretty much sums it up. So that sherry cask tradition was established by James Allardyce, who set up the distillery in 1826, and that has been carried on down through the years by the various owners. GlenDronach's whiskies are recognised for their deep colour and rich flavour profiles, which range from sweet, fruity flavours from the Pedro Jimenez casks that are used in the maturation process to the dry and nutty notes from the Oloroso casks. Indeed, that's a hell of a good fine Spanish influence. So what's the crack with James Allardyce? Who was he? What was he all about? Let's take a look. Well, he inherited the Boynes Mills estate in 1800, but by virtue of living as a tenant of a guy called John Morrison of Auchentall in a place called Coburty, a couple of years later he was given the moniker Cobby. Now it appears he was quite the enterprising guy, and because of that nature, the benefit of his inheritance, plus an equally enterprising young nephew by the name of Robert Davison, and two local farmers, the Dronach was born. So we've established who Cobby is, so let's take a look at the long history of GlenDronach Distillery. Now, just 4 years after the distillery was set up, GlenDronach was taken over by a guy called Walter Scott. Now, there's not a lot to report about him or anything much about him for a good few years after that, but one point of interest comes 30 years later, in the 1860s, when GlenDronach was the highest duty paying distillery in the Highlands, and they had over 50 workers and their families living on site. Now, the next major point of note was in 1920, when GlenDronach was bought over by Captain Charles Grant. Now, you may not have heard of him, but he was the son of the Glenfiddich founder William Grant. So follow on now another 40 years after that, and we see the next milestone in the distillery's history, and that was when William Teachers and Sons took over. And this was significant because at that time they doubled the output by increasing the distillery stills from 2 to 4. They then came along Allied Distillers, and they mothballed the distillery in 1996 until it was opened again in 2002. Roll on a few more years, guess what? More change. And this was in 2005, and this time it was taken over by Pernod Ricard, and the distillery was passed on to Chivas Brothers to manage. Now, at that point, GlenDronach was one of the last distilleries to heat its stills in the traditional coal-fired method, but the new owners changed all that and brought in steam heating. Now, it was all changed again in 2008 when Ben Rake took over, and during their time, GlenDronach was named Global Whisky Distiller of the Year at the Icon of Whisky Awards in 2015. However, just 1 year later, it was all changed again. Brown-Forman took over, and they are still the owners to this day. So, that's enough about the history. Let's get into the whisky and see what it's like. Welcome back, folks. Now we're at the moment we've all been looking forward to. Well, at least I have anyway. It's time to get into the whisky, see what it's all about. and I've got my whisky tasting cap on. You see there, Teeling Whisky. Well, it's not really for the tasting, it's just to keep the glare off my big bald head. So in review number 7, I looked up the GlenDronach cask strength batch 7, which comes in at 57.9% ABV, and it was so awesome that I just had to get more GlenDronach. So we got this here 12-year-old, which is the distillery's core bottling, which is matured in the finest Pedro Jimenez and Oloroso sherry casks and bottled at 43% ABV, non-chill filtered, all natural colour. So let's get into it now, see what it's actually like, and we'll start off with the nosing. The unsurprisingly right up front there's a sherry sweetness, but with it there's a simmering warmth of gentle spice. And coming with that as well, there's a rich creaminess, and it just fills the nostrils, brings with it a lovely vanilla note and a slice of pear as well. So let's give it a whirl in the palate. Right off again in the palate, there's sherry soaked pear, it's a sprinkling of warming mixed spice, and it's immediately mouth coating, and that allows the flavours to both expand and linger. Then in come the raisins, sultanas, rich Christmas cake. Now throughout the sherry influence remains, it leads to wood, mashed fruits, and once again a spicy pear finish with some oak. Now overall, this is really a lovely whisky. It's great in the nose, it's great in the palate, and it's just all round a quality product. If you're into sherry cask finishes, this is definitely one for you. And even if you're not, you know, it's certainly worth a try, because this could well be the one that changes your mind. So thanks for watching, folks. Please share your comments or experiences of GlenDronach down below, and don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so you can stay notified of all things Whisky Straight. So until next time, stay safe and keep on drinking your whisky the way you like it. Sláinte.